like I was doing. We're going to now take it at par value, okay? And that's going to make it 100,000. And all of the common stock to be distributed is going to be at par value. It's not going to be at additional paid-in capital, right? Why? Because it's all at par, right? 25,000 times 40% times $10 is all going to go in at par value. And then once it is going to be distributed, what are we going to do? Or once it's distributed, we're going to debit it and credit it all for common stock. Okay? So if we do that, then what is our common stock amount? 350? Because we're not going to have any additional paid-in capital down here. It's all going right into common stock at par value. And what about our retained earnings? How much are they going to go down? What were they? They were, they were at 200. They're going down 100,000, aren't they? So, do you see how our retained earnings, our stockholders' equity still hasn't changed? But we now have more common stock. Our additional paid-in capital didn't change because the amount of it was greater than 20%, or did you say 25? 25%. That's the key. I'm not getting it. That's the key. Remember, if it's 20%, you're going to continue to do it the way we did with the 6%. But once it's 25%, what are we going to do? It's all going to be distributed only at par value, not at fair market value. Or market value is the right way to say it. Make sense? Do we know that trick? Now that could maybe be a trick on a multiple choice. Do you get what I'm kind of saying? Hint, hint. Okay? Are we good there? How many guys get this? I will put on the Moodle the solutions so you can go over other problems like this. You don't need to go over totally different problems because, again, if we go over it in class, you're going to see it. Any questions before we move back to the PowerPoint? Yes, no? Are we good? Okay. So as we move back to the PowerPoint, we started talking about shareholders' equity. How do we account for prior period? So we started talking about shareholders' equity. And shareholders' equity, one thing I do want to just pay a little bit of attention to is if there's restrictions on retained earnings, those monies can't be used to pay dividends. Did you guys know that? Did you go over that? If there is a restriction on monies, they cannot be used to be used to pay dividends. Sometimes for purposes, maybe debt, they have restrictions on retained earnings that they're restricted for a certain use. How many of you guys have taken nonprofit accounting yet? Or fund accounting? Okay.
Wait, what did you?
I wonder if y'all have that in here. Oh, that's interesting.
Can you repeat what you said again?
If there is a restriction in the retained earnings for us on a certain amount of retained earnings, that money cannot be used for dividends because it's restricted for a particular purpose. Okay? Got it? Now, we're going to start talking about the shareholders' equity. In the shareholders' equity, we all know that's part of the balance sheet, don't we? And we started out with shareholders equity just being owner's equity, and then we're getting a little smarter, realizing it can get really confusing. Don't you like how accounting does that? It starts out simple, and it's the same concepts, guys. It just gets a little more involved, right? It's still debits and credits, and shareholders equity still increases with credits, but now we get little segments of various aspects of shareholders equity. Here you can see with shareholders equity that we've got it broken down, starting the period with common stock at par value, and then additional paid in capital. Did you guys talk about treasury stock at all? Treasury stock is that stock that the company purchases back from the public. Why would a company want to do that? To keep from getting taken over. So they're basically tightening up on certain financing purposes. They're bringing in some stock. That would actually be a good. Not that you care to learn anymore. You got plenty, but that would be an interesting little research on articles as to find out companies that do buy back their stock and what incentive they had to get back their stock. See, I like articles that can relate to kind of what we're talking about. Why do they do that? You know, and find out why are companies doing that. So we've got treasury stock. We've got common stock option warrants. So options out there to purchase stock. Then we've got retained earnings. And then we've got other accumulated comprehensive income and treasury stock. So we've got all kinds of different aspects of our stockholders' equity, and issued for cash. We've got issued for exercise of share options, compensation expense for options, and unrealized increase in value of available for sale securities. My gosh, we add our net income, subtract our dividends, and now we end up with our ending balances. So you see, it's become a lot more complicated than just owner's equity, right? So basically, here's part 2 of the slide showing the breakdown of how the stock is laid out here. With our common stock, we're showing the par value. We're showing the additional paid in stock, the additional paid in from treasury, the option warrants, the capital, retained earnings, and then the other comprehensive income. So it's this exact same information displayed in this manner. Okay? It's the same information, but this is how it's displayed on the financial statements. What is accumulated other comprehensive income? It's net income and something called other comprehensive income. What could it be? What's the difference between something realized and unrealized?
You know what's going to happen versus you don't know what's going to happen.
Realized income has already occurred. Unrealized income, maybe a transaction has not yet technically occurred, but it's unrealized. So for example, let's say my stock, I have some Apple stock that I bought at $30 a share. I haven't sold it. It's still sitting now on my portfolio. Okay, so let me make it this way to help you understand it. So let's just say I have 100 shares of Apple, and when I bought it, it was at $30 a share. Now I don't even know if this is realistic, but just go along with me. So when I bought it, I spent $3,000 on it, didn't I? Now when I get my Edward Jones statement, assuming it hasn't split, or I have 100 shares at $300 a share, or $30,000. Now my profit, I will have an unrealized gain here of how much? 20. Why is it unrealized though?
You don't have the money, it's still in the market.
Poor thing.
Yeah, you got
Poor thing. That's what my daughter does. She just sticks Kleenex up her nose.
It's inevitable. I don't care how I look.
It's okay.
At least
Do you-
I'm in the front.
No one can see you. Do you guys see how it's unrealized? Because I haven't sold it yet.
You just have the potential to make that much.
Right now it's worth that. When I was married to a Northwest pilot, and this was when we had all this stock, and at one time we thought like we were wealthy, ha ha ha, and then it went bankrupt. Guess what? I still had the shares, but they weren't worth what I thought they were worth. Get it? At one time I had unrealized gains, but I never sold them like I should have. Get it? Unrealized, technically, it's there, but you haven't created the transaction, because we normally record transactions, economic events. You know what I'm talking about? But there are certain things that are recorded at fair value, even though we haven't necessarily sold them. So, unrealized gains or losses in the fair value of investments in available for sale securities. So guys, what happens is when we have a building, this building here, this building probably was, the cost when they initially built it 100 years ago was probably, let's even say $200,000. And then they've depreciated it, so it's probably at zero. But what do you think it's worth, the fair market value? Just guess. Come on, can't you just guess?
$50.
Okay, I was going to say like several million. Just the
Yeah.
land is worth 50 million. But this is not an available for sale marketable security. How many of us could go and buy this? Do you know anyone who would go buy this? Do you get what I'm saying? But there are certain investments that have, through time, the new gap is that certain available for sale securities that anyone can just get on the market and buy and sell with the click of a computer get recorded at market value. This is unique. Doesn't happen very often. But this is one. It's an available for sale security. And this gets recorded at market value. Now, the net is true. The negative is true too. If I buy something at $100 and now it's worth 10, guess what? I got to show that too, because we want a realistic view of really our financial position. Make sense? So this other comprehensive income includes these unrealized increases or decreases, translation adjustments from converting financial statements of a company's foreign operations into US dollars. Boy, guys, we're dealing with a whole nother animal here. We've got various currencies. And we have exchange rates, and they change all the time. So unless we actually have it in US dollars, it's unrealized, right? Get what I'm saying? But we still need to report that, okay? If it's up or down, where it's at. And then gains and losses on certain types of derivative financial instruments. I'll be real honest with you. I'm going to learn about those with you, because I don't really know what derivative instruments they're dealing with. But I'm going to learn alongside of you. Certain types of pension plan gains, losses, and cost adjustments. Again, these are investments that are available for sale, because most of our pensions are sitting in the market. Got it? So, in our statement of retained earnings, we're going to add prior period adjustments, and then we're going to have plus or minus our net income, and then we're going to minus out any dividends or any reacquisition of our capital stock, and then potentially converting bonds or preferred stock into capital stock. And then we have our ending retained earnings. Guys, it's the same retained earnings, it's just getting a little more complicated. But it's the same thing, isn't it? Do you see how we're just getting more detailed? Don't let it freak you out. You don't have to memorize this stuff, okay? It's still retained earnings. It's just a little more numbers added to it. Okay, so here we've got September 27th of 2009. We've got October